Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to the presentation. Okay, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Fang Xiaozhao, and I just obtained my bachelor's degree from Huazhong Agricultural University. Today, I would like to share the study entitled Online Food Delivery Platform contributed to the resilience of the urban food system in China during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, I will introduce this research from the following 5 parts. The first part is the introduction of this study. The outbreak of COVID-19 and related preventive measures such as lockdowns, curfews, transport restrictions pose a great threat to the global and local food supply system. During the lockdown period, most restaurants in China were closed. Those restaurants that remained open shifted their traditional food service to delivery, takeout, and outdoor dining. The shifting of consumers' dining behavior and business transaction of restaurants emphasized the essential role of online food delivery platform in food system during the pandemic. At the same time, China is the largest market for online food delivery and takeaway. Platforms such as Ele.me, Meituan, and Baidu have developed rapidly with advances in apps, smartphone, and e-pay terminal technologies. When experiencing shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic, an efficient food delivery system can enhance the resilience of urban food supply chains by improving food accessibility and availability. However, to date, there is not sufficient empirical evidence that evaluates the role of online food delivery during the COVID-19. So the objective of this study is using the high-frequency data to quantify the performance of online food delivery platform during the COVID-19 and to estimate the short and long-term effects of lockdown and reopening measures. So the contributions of this study include, but are not limited to, the following points. First, this is the first study that highlights on the importance of online food delivery in response to the COVID-19. Second, compared with previous descriptive studies based on micro-level data, this study uses daily city-level data to do rigorous empirical analysis. Third, our study contributes to the existing literature, and our findings reveal some changes in consumers' preference for different categories of online ordered food during and after the implementation of lockdown policies. The second part is the data of this study. We followed previous literature and sampled 57 cities from all 3 types of lockdown response. There are 15 cities under complete lockdown, 7 cities under partial lockdown, and 35 no lockdown cities. We define complete lockdown cities and partial lockdown cities as treatment group, and the control group is the no lockdown cities. We collect the date of lockdown and reopening based on official announcements from the website of the local government for each city. And this is the sample cities. This is a map that shows the sample cities used in this research, and we can see that it is widely distributed from the country. As for the dependent variable, we obtain data on online food delivery from Ele.me platform, which is one of the 2 dominant online food delivery platforms in China. And under the agreement with Ele.me platform, we were allowed to use the data in this period, and the daily city-level food delivery data included as follows. Also, we control the daily new COVID-19 cases and temperature and the precipitation and the date fixed effects and the city fixed effects at the same time. To examine the impact of lockdown and reopenings on food takeaway service through online food delivery platforms, we first use the staggered difference in differences estimation strategy, and we divided the sample period of each city into 3 stages. before lockdown period, and reopening, and make comparison between the two stages. Next, to better understand the adjustment path of online food delivery outcome variables, we employed the event study approach to estimate effects on outcome variables at different times. So let me see the estimation results. After lockdown, both total transaction volumes and the number of orders and restaurants of online food deliveries decreased significantly, but the average transaction volume and the average number of online food delivery orders per restaurant increased. After reopening transaction volume of online food deliveries, the total number of online food delivery orders and the number of restaurants all recovered quickly. However, the average transaction volume and online food delivery orders per restaurant declined compared with the lockdown period. We also estimate the long-term effects of the reopening policies. And the results of event study show that the adjustment path of online food delivery to the implementation of lockdowns differed from the adjustment path after lockdowns were lifted. And to test whether the lockdown and reopening measures affected all types of cuisines equally, we divided all restaurants into 4 groups: Chinese, Western, fresh, and snacks. The lockdowns and reopening measures didn't affect all types of cuisines equally. And we investigated 3 potential mechanisms that could explain the effects of lockdown measures on online food delivery: Baidu Search Index, and the delivery fee per order, and the Baidu in-near city mobility index. And we conducted 3 robustness and placebo tests. In general, our main findings are robust. So the main findings are listed as follows. And as for the policy implications, we suggest that in the low and middle income countries that have a relatively high levels of internet and other infrastructure, the promotion of online food delivery platforms could contribute to the resilience of the urban food system, and they can learn from China's experience. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, Fang Xiao. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And your article is very interesting and your presentation is excellent. But I want to ask why you not consider the economic factors in your study?
Thanks for your question. In this study, we didn't consider economic factors, and we only control the COVID-19 cases, temperature, and precipitation, because we only considered the first outbreak of COVID-19 in China. As we know, after the first outbreak of COVID-19, there are many new epidemics emerged in some cities in China, and most of the subsequent outbreak occurred in large cities, and this may be related with the economic factors. But we think the first outbreak of COVID-19 in China is relatively random and not affected by other confounding factors. So we don't consider the economic factors in this study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed that you used the staggered difference in method in your study, and there are many new developments in this area, and I suggest you add some latest staggered difference in tests in your article as a next step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your suggestion. Yes, there have been many new developments recently in staggered difference in differences method. So we are also reading the latest literature and try to add some new tests to meet the requirements for using this method.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for suggestions.
Well, okay, if no more questions, I think I'm the second one presenter, so I will share my screen now. Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Could you see my screen now? So anyone can see my screen now?
Yeah,
So
very clearly.
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, just one step. Okay, here. Okay, thank you everyone to come to my presentation. And my name is Wenling, and I'm a research fellow at the Department of Agricultural Economics at Zhejiang University. And it's a great honor to present our work here because I have not participated AAEA for at least 2 years. So it's great to see some old names. I saw Melissa there, and I graduated from Michigan State. So it's great to see some old friends and meeting some new faces. So today I will talk about a research entitled Unintended Consequence of Decentralized Food Safety Regulation. This is a joint work with a PhD student at the same institution from Zhejiang University, and her name is Jiang Liang. I think she is also in the audience. So let's just begin. So what do we study in this paper? So first is about decentralization. So what is decentralization? It's basically in general, it's kind of it's related to a distribution of regulatory powers between different levels of government. So in particular, decentralization refers to the case where the regulatory power is delegated from the upper level government to the lower level government, such as from central government to local government, and from federal government to state government in the United States context. So it's well recognized that many different mixed consequences of decentralization. Someone may argue that the decentralization may be social welfare improving because the local government have more access to information and they are more capable to cater local environment. But there are also like the problem between central government and the local government, also just like the very classic principal agent problems. So these two types of governments have conflict interest. So this kind of distortion will contribute to decreasing of social welfare. And recently, there are a lot of studies that tries to explore other aspects that will affect the effects of decentralization, such as externalities. For example, if the good being regulated has very strong spillover effects, such as externality, the decentralization will discourage the local governments to will discourage the local government, so it will be social welfare decreasing. But if the central government have very strong supervision power, like the goals of local government and central government will be more likely to align in the same fit in the same boat. So it will be social welfare improving. So what we do in our paper, we try to explore another aspect, which is about the access to local input. We are trying to explain like how the access to local input resources will also affect the consequence of decentralization. So this is our kind of a way what we add to the decentralized literature. So to answer these questions, we utilize we focus on a unique sector. It's about the food processing and manufacturing industry. This kind of why we focus on this food industry, because it's very heavily relies on agricultural resources because agricultural products are so like perishable. So the food industry, when they're considering their locations, they must be close to agricultural production areas. So we focus on this industry. And we in this paper, we utilize a quasi-experiment in China, which in China's food industry sector. And in particular, we take the example of a decentralized food safety regulation reform in 2013. And in this year, the state concern of China delegates the food safety regulation power from the provincial government to city level government. This means that before this decentralized reform, the provincial government are responsible for like a personnel appointment, like who take charge of the food safety in this area, and budget management and allocation, etc. for within province city regulatory agents. But after this reform, each city government are now responsible for personal appointment and budget allocation for its own food safety regulatory agents. So you'll see like this is a kind of decentralized reform, and after this reform, like the food safety regulation power are given to city level government from the provincial government. And this picture shows the official document in the Chinese central government website. So before we jump into very detailed empirical strategies and data results, let me just have let me just give you a preview of our research questions and our preliminary findings. So we are trying to investigate the two research questions. The first is, does decentralization improve food safety, which is a goal of central government? And if yes, how does it improve? And if not, is local government compromised food safety for food industry growth as in a centralized political system? The local government get promoted for their economic performance, so they always have the incentive to promote food industry development. So our preliminary findings reveals first, we didn't find any evidence that the food decentralization have improved food safety. Although this kind of evidence is still preliminary, because we use only provincial level evidence, but we are still working on this end. The second, we found decentralization significantly encouraged the market entry, especially the entry of private firms and self-employed business. Why we found this case a mechanism we found is that because after decentralization, the local government have lost their administrative punishment intensity in food sector. And but although the decentralization has kind of promote the food market, however, a more market entry doesn't necessarily mean the food industry has the food industry has performed better, because we found that the decentralization hurts the economic performance of incumbent and large-scale firms, because their competition becomes more severe. They just increase because of increased competition as more small-scale firms enter the market. So in this work, we basically relied on difference approach, as well as some modifications. First, we used staggered difference approach, and we relied on provincial level food safety indicators, which means the number of foodborne disease patients and all cases at province P and year T. So we use this kind of method to see whether the decentralization improved the food safety level in that province. So after we doing this, we use another difference approach to find whether the decentralization has improved the food industry growth at extensive and intensive margin. And for extensive margin, we use the city level market entry, which refers to like the number of firms in food processing and manufacturing industry that are registered at year T of city C. So basically, we focus on beta 3. We want to see if beta 3 is statistically significant. So this is for extensive margin, and for intensive margin, we use a triple D approach. And now our dependent variables change to province industry level revenue. And we want to see if the decentralization has improved the total revenue of large-scale industry enterprise within industry I in province P at year T. So this descent prof and industry IPT, the key independent variables is a dummy variable, and it equals to 1 if the industry I is food industry in year P in province P, which implement decentralization at the year T. So it's as you can see, this is a triple D approach. So this is basically the empirical strategy, and we combined many different the data set from many different sources, such as China's Health Statistical Yearbook, which we drew our food safety indicators, and also like the provincial statistical yearbook and China's industry economics statistical yearbook. And for the market entry, we use the most comprehensive form registration data set. It covers over 3 million food firms and self-employed business in the year from the year 2010 and to 2018. And this registration records include details detailed information about the firms, location, startup times, and capital, etc., and their business scope, etc. So this describes some summary statistics of our data. So let's jump into our results. So our first result shows that the decentralization has no statistical impact on food safety. Even though this is a case for both the foodborne disease cases and the foodborne disease patients, that have no significant impact. And second, we find that the decentralization has significantly encouraged market entry. You see, the current one is the market entry of food firms and self-employed business, and the current two is a food firm only. And like, even though we add more control variables, our results are still robust. And we found that after decentralization, the food firms and the self-employed business are significantly increases. And if you see the column 5 to column 8, you can find this is kind of a heterogeneity analysis, which will separate our food sample by firm type. From type subsamples, there are subsample analysis, and we can find that market entry is largely dominated by the entry of self-employed business. Like you can see, the column 8 have very strong, very large magnitude. So the market entry is driven by the entry of private firms and the self-employed business, which are, and both of these types are very small, very small scale. Sorry, I will speed up. Thanks for your reminder. Then we looked into how then we further separate our first sample by the province with low agricultural resources and province with high agriculture, with abundant agricultural resources. And we found for areas with more access to input, the market entry is even stronger, because it's even stronger. So we find why. So we further test that why after decentralization there are more market entry, and we find supporting evidence that this is because the local government has reduced their punishment intensity. So from this result, you can find for cities with more market entry, their food-related punishment is significantly lower. And then we looked into how the decentralization affects the intensive margin of food industry growth. And we found that the food, basically the decentralization has significantly decreased the revenue of large-scale food firms and existing food firms, because the competition is more, because of the increased competition from the small-scale entrants. And this kind of effect is even stronger in areas with abundant agricultural resources, because their market entry of small businesses is even stronger. So let's just quickly warm up. So we find that there's a kind of knowing situation. Even though the goal of decentralization by central government is to improve the food safety, but we didn't find the food safety level is increased after decentralization. And second, we find evidence that that the local government seems to compromise food safety for food industry growth. This is evidenced by more small-scale food farms and self-employed business enter the market after decentralization. However, the increased market entry does not benefit the local food economy because the increased competition has hurt the large scale and existing farms. So it seems like a no-win situation for both central government and the local government. So I think I can just end here, and if there are questions, I can answer. Sorry for just using too much time. Sorry about that.
Okay. If there are no questions, is it okay if I begin my presentation?
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia. I think someone needs to control this presentations. We only have 8 minutes for each presentation. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Soumya Gupta. I am a research economist at the Tata Cornell Institute for Agriculture and Nutrition at Cornell University. And I'm going to be talking to you today about work that we have done on women's nutritional empowerment, structural transformation, and intra-household diets using India's National Family Health Survey. This is work that has been co-authored with Payal Seth and Prabhu Pingali, who are also at the DCI, and Vidya Vemi Reddy, who is at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in India. So I want to begin by touching upon how we have enough evidence and data to show that nutritional outcomes are not equitable across genders within the same household. So for instance, in the case of India, we find that prevalence of anemia is much higher for women and children as compared to men, if you look within the same household. And similarly for some of the other nutritional outcomes as well. One of the leading causes or the drivers of poor nutritional outcomes is a poor quality of diet. And we have evidence from our work in India and elsewhere that diets also tend to vary by gender and by age. And in order to improve diets and therefore to improve nutritional outcomes, women's empowerment has often been promoted as a nutrition-sensitive intervention. Women's decision-making, their access to resources, their control over resources like income, and the use of their time are all factors that have been associated with improved nutritional outcomes in different settings. But more and more, we're finding that gains from women's empowerment can also accrue differently to different members of the same household. And the women's empowerment to diet diversity pathway doesn't operate in isolation. We find that it is the extent to which it results in more diverse diets and therefore better nutritional outcomes is likely to be determined by the level of structural transformation, which is basically that as economies undergo the process of structural transformation, the share of agriculture in GDP declines, incomes increase, the rates of urbanization increase, and so on. And when that happens, regions that are at an advanced stage of such development are likely to see higher incomes for households and better market access, all of which is expected to translate into better quality and more diverse diets. So our objectives were threefold when we were looking at this body of work. The first was to look at whether there are any differences in diet diversity for men and women within the same household. So this was an intra-household analysis. Then we wanted to look at the extent to which women's empowerment can drive individual level diets. And we look at diets for both men and women, and we look at whether that empowerment diet relationship varies by gender. And finally, we want to look at what happens to the empowerment diets relationship when we account for variations in the levels of growth and development within the country. So we know that in India, different states have had very different trajectories of growth and therefore are at different levels of income, different kinds of market setups. And we want to look at whether empowerment continues to have a sort of independent association with diets even after those differences in growth are accounted for. So the data for this comes from the National Family Health Survey, the fourth round of which was conducted in 2015-16. And this is a nationally representative survey. It has covered over 600 districts in the country. So it's sort of perfect for subnational analysis. We look at a subsample within the survey of around 63,000 households where we have information on food intake for both men and women within the same household. And this is based on whether or not each of those individuals consumed one of 7 food groups. And we compute what's called a diet diversity score, which is basically a sum of food groups consumed over the last 24 hours and 7 days. The NFHS also has a lot of data. We use almost 70 variables to compute a Women's Empowerment and Nutrition Index, which is basically capturing women's decision-making, access to resources and agencies across 4 domains and 3 dimensions. So it comes to about a total of 10 domain dimensions that I'll talk about in a while. And finally, to account for variations in structural transformation, we use geospatial data on nightlights composite, which basically has been used as a proxy for economic growth, urbanization, and therefore food access within the country in different other studies, various other studies. So the first thing we find is that women's diets are less diverse than that of men. We see that in lagging states that are at lower levels of income as compared to progressive states. We see that at a district level, which is the map on the right. And we find that if we disaggregate the diet diversity score, then the difference lies in fewer women consuming. Excuse me, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. In fewer women consuming these nutrient-rich food groups as compared to men. We also find that women on the whole are disempowered in nutrition-related domains. The average WANI score in our sample is 0.34, which is lower than a threshold of 0.5. Again, we find that there is, district level variation in the fraction of empowered women. And we find that if you look at the 3 domain dimensions at the bottom here that are related to food, agency, resources, and knowledge, these are the 3 where some of the fewest women are empowered. So we find that WANI is a significant driver of both men and women's diets for both recall periods, even when we account for changes in or variations in economic growth and income as proxied by nightlights. That relationship continues to hold for both men and women, even after other controls are accounted for. And finally, we do a heterogeneity analysis where we look at households by household wealth, because the survey provides us with wealth quintiles and classifies households into different wealth quintiles. And what we find is that for the lower income quintiles, so the poorest, for instance, and the poorer in the case of women, WANI is significant, whereas nightlights tend to take a stronger role when you go to the higher income levels. And similarly, in the case of men's diets as well, at the poorest quintile, the WANI is a significant driver. And as we move to the richest quintile, we find that it's replaced by nightlights. So I want to conclude by saying that our conclusion in this body of work is that when we're talking about improving nutritional outcomes, we want to look at the specific economic growth context in which we want to improve those outcomes. So what our analysis shows is that if you just look at an all India picture, then both economic growth and empowerment are significant drivers of diet diversity. But once we go at a subnational level, we find that lower income households for both men and women are likely to benefit from women's nutritional empowerment, whereas middle, rich, and richest quintiles are more likely to benefit from the roles of economic growth, income, urbanization, and so on. So we know structural transformation results in higher incomes and better market access. For the predominantly rural population, we are suggesting commercialization of agriculture as one way to increase incomes, and also, of course, supporting that by increase in non-farm incomes and remittances. And finally, from an analysis point of view, we always recommend and want better detailed and disaggregated data on food consumption. So I'll end with that, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. So if there are no questions, I think we can move to the next speaker.
Okay, I will share my screen. Hi everyone, I'm Jia Qixuan, a PhD student from Zhejiang University. It's a pleasure to participate in this meeting and share our research. My topic is substitute or complement quantity-quality effects of agricultural production diversity and market access on dietary diversity in rural China. First, let's begin with the background. Malnutrition is still pervasive in the world and is associated with suboptimal diets. In China, suboptimal diets have been the leading risk factor for diseases and mortality, causing more than 3 million deaths in 2017. With the rapid dietary transition, Chinese residents have already consumed excessive amounts of refined grains and meat, while their intake of vegetables, fruits, and dairy products is still insufficient, particularly for rural residents. Meantime, external shocks, including conflicts, weather extremes, and the COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbate the challenge. Increasing dietary diversity is essential for human nutrition and health. Studies have found that people with a higher quantity scores of dietary diversity tend to have a lower risk of micronutrient deficiency and multimorbidity. However, higher quantity scores do not necessarily reflect healthier diets. The quality aspect within quantity scores is still worth exploring. So how to increase rural residents' dietary diversity and improve their nutrition? Here we point out two channels. First, as rural residents in China primarily rely on their own production for income and food, diversifying agricultural production appears to be a viable option. And existing evidence indicates a positive association between agricultural production diversity and dietary diversity. However, most of them use cross-sectional data and fail to address the endogenous issue. Markets is another important channel. With the development of markets, improved market access also contributes to increase the dietary diversity scores and seems to be a more effective strategy. Then a follow-up question naturally arises. Can markets substitute on production's role, or is there a complementary relationship between these two channels? To answer these questions, we provide a nuanced investigation into the joint impacts of agriculture production diversity, market access on dietary diversity, as are the effects on closing the nutrition gaps with respect to the recommended intake amount using cohort data from rural China. Specifically, we tested 5 research hypotheses. We assume that agricultural production diversity and market access have both positive impacts on dietary diversity scores, and they have not only substitution effects in promoting quantity scores of dietary diversity scores, but also complementary effects on adjusting the intake of specific food groups. We used the panel data from China Health and Nutrition Survey with 4 waves from 2004 to 2011, and we focused on rural residents. We used the panel fixed effect models, and we use the average agriculture production diversity in the village as an instrumental variable. Let's look at the results. We find that the impact of agriculture production diversity on dietary diversity score remains positive and statistically significant. And notably, the efficiency becomes larger when the IV method is applied, suggesting that the results are likely to be underestimated without considering the reverse causality. And market access is also critical to promoting dietary diversity's goal. The closer residents are to the markets, the more diverse their diets. After adding the interaction term, agriculture production diversity and market access present a substitution relationship. The marginal contribution of production diversity becomes weaker with market distance reduction. And we conduct several robustness checks to verify the validity of the results. The results remain robust. We further investigate the heterogeneous effects of these two food channels across different demographic groups. Across different age groups, we find that market access plays an important role for children, while agricultural production diversity appears more important for adults, especially older adults. Across different income groups, agricultural production diversity plays a more important role for individuals within lower income households in providing diverse foods. And the results provide evidence on substitution relationship, especially for those whose income, especially for those with higher food affordability. Then to explore the complementary effects on the quality of diversified diets, we regress the deviation between consumption and the recommended intake amount on agricultural production diversity and market access. Here, agricultural production diversity is divided into farming, gardening, livestock or poultry raising, and fishing, corresponding to related food groups. Focus on the results of agricultural production. We find engaging in a certain agricultural production activity increases the intake of the corresponding food group. For example, engaging in gardening contributes to increasing the intake of vegetables and fruits. And agricultural production diversity, excluding the corresponding production activity of the food group, can promote the rational intake of cereals and tubers, fruits, meats, eggs, and aquatic products. Notably, we find complementary effects on adjusting the intake of cereals and tubers, meat, and aquatic products. For example, engaging in farming or livestock raising would result in excessive intake of cereals and tubers and meat, whereas improving market access could close the intake to recommended intake gap. Finally, a summary of our findings. Both market access and diversification of self-production have substitution effects on promoting an overall quantity scores of dietary diversity, and they complement each other in improving the quality aspect of dietary diversity. Agricultural production diversity is essential for the low-income group and older adults, and helps reduce excessive intake of cereals, tubers, and meat, and increase intake of vegetables, fruits, and eggs. While markets provide effective food access, especially for children, and complement the role of on-production in optimizing the intake of cereals and tubers, meat, and aquatic products. Thus, improving dietary diversity in quantity and quality terms requires a combination of diverse production layouts and market access improvement. Thanks for your listening.
I think if there is no question, I will start my presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Hao Cai, and I am now a PhD student in China Academy for Rural Development, Zhejiang University. And today I'm gonna share with you a research entitled Taking into Account Affordable and Healthy Diets Implications for Sustainable Development. And according to a report from Chinese Nutrition Society, the prevalence of overweight, obesity, hypertension, and diabetes has dramatically increased in China over the past decades. More than 1/3 of Chinese people are overweight, which are closely related to unhealthy food consumption patterns. Meanwhile, Chinese diets are not budget-friendly for poor people, as presented in Figure 4. Food expenditure each day estimated for China is higher than the extreme poverty line defined by the UN. Furthermore, food production is leading to many environmental issues in China. For instance, the total GHG emissions from Chinese food system grew to more than 2,500 million tons CO2 equivalents in 2018, accounting for more than 18% of overall GHG emissions of China. So in this research, we explore a dietary transformation in China to improve performance of Chinese diets on health, affordability, and environment at the same time. So we established an optimization model to study this topic, and we call the model hand diets. The hand diets is a multi-object bi-level model with nutrition and energy intake constraints. The sub-model of which firstly solve optimal food consumption with minimum food expenditure and environmental impacts. The master model tries to find an ideal solution considering six targets and the dietary shift from a representative diet. The parameter beta is the dietary transformation strength, DTS, and the parameter alpha represents the weights assigned to food expenditure and environmental impacts. And we used a global partial equilibrium model of the land use sector, which is a model of agricultural production and its impact on the environment, MACPI. So MACPI uses socio-economic drivers from shared socio-economic pathway, SSPS, and biophysical information from LPGML model. The food demand in MACPI can be generated endogenously or given exogenously. Driven by these variables, MACPI dynamically simulates production, consumption, and resources and environmental flows in global food sector. With MACPI's results, we can study some indicators related to sustainable development goals proposed by the UN. In this research, we studied SDG 1, 2, 3, 6, 12, and 15. After solving the hand diets model, we input the food consumption bundle to MACPI as the exogenous intake target. We design a coupling process for hand diets and MACPI due to there are inconsistencies between their environmental parameters, and is presented in Fig 6. Adopting two representative diet patterns and setting different DTS, we construct three hand diet scenarios, which are hand diet plus, and hand diet FX. The hand diet scenario is a moderate one with 0.2 DTS. Its representative diet is from business usual scenario of MACPI wrong, and the hand diet plus scenario is more radical with 0.5 DTS. And the hand diet FLX scenario has a different representative diet proposed by the EAT Lancet Commission, and its DTS is 0.5. We also use SSP2 wrong of MACPI SBAU and flexitarian wrong of MACPI for comparison. So let's look at the intake targets from basic hand diets. The unit is dry matter grain, and the three circles in Figure 7 are the intake targets for the year 2010, 2030, and 2050. The top four food categories recommended are still rice, cereals, vegetables and fruits, and pork, which conforms to typical Chinese food consumption pattern. And detailedly compared with BU intakes of ruminant meat, chicken, maize, etc. are suggested to be reduced. Soybean, groundnut, milk, etc. are suggested to be eaten more for protein and energy requirement. Intakes of Chinese favorite foods like rice, cereals, pork don't have big chance. And compared to FLX diet proposed by the AAEA Commission, intakes of oracle crops, milk, and vegetable and fruits are less, while rice, cereals, and animal products are suggested to be eaten more. So compared to the BU and FLX, we think the basic hand diet scenario is an intermediate pathway for dietary transformation. Meanwhile, we also calculate dietary indices scores of food consumption bundles under 5 scenarios, which evaluate the dietary quality. We find the dietary quality of the BU diet is getting worse, and all our 4 scenarios have better dietary qualities. The hand diet shows the best dietary quality under our indices. Next, we investigate GHG emissions from a food sector under 5 diet scenarios. The panel ABC is CH4, NGO, and CO2 emissions respectively. All 4 exogenous diet scenarios achieve GHG abatement compared to BAU, and the hand diet FLX emits a minimal GHG, followed by FLX, and the GHG emission is closely related to livestock consumption. So diet scenarios with less livestock consumption also own fewer GHG emissions. Then we shed the light on 6 SDG indicators. The BAU diet with green color has the worst performance on 5 of 6 indicators, and the hand diet plus with dark blue color has the lowest food expenditure in panel A, and the biggest biodiversity index in panel E, and the biggest non-agricultural land share in panel F. The hand diet FLX, which is a combination of hand diet and flexitarian diet, performance is better than FLX diet on biodiversity, fertilizer use, and non-agricultural land share. So due to our research is not finished yet, so we just draft some simple conclusions here. The current Chinese diet has considerable potential to be improved from health, economic, and environmental perspectives. The hand diet FLX with the highest dietary quality and lowest GHG emissions still performance is good on SDG indicators. So it can be regarded as the best option for Chinese dietary transformation. And we also believe that a moderate transformation proposal such as the hand diet plus can serve as an attempt to soften Chinese resistance to dietary transformation. And with the lowest food expenditure, the hand diet plus can also involve more low-income Chinese into the dietary transformation process. That's all my presentation, and I'm fully welcome to your questions. Well, I think we can move to the next presenter.
Okay, if there's no more question, I will start my presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Yifeng Luo. I'm from the University of Georgia. The title of my today's report is Prediction of Weak Program Participation, a machine learning approach to fix the reporting error. First, let me briefly introduce the weak program. The full name of this program is Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. As you can see from the name, this program safeguards the health of low-income women, infants, and children up to 5 by providing supplemental food, nutrition education, and healthcare referrals. In the US, more than half of the infants and more than a quarter of the children up to 5 have a participant in this program. So it's really influential. The true status of the participation is vital for accurate program evaluation. However, the misreporting rate issue is severe. According to Meyer study in 2020, around from 20% to 50%, the misreporting error is prevalence in all the social economic surveys. And what can machine learning do? The classification algorithms is a supervised learning technique that is used to identify the category of new observations based on training data. Based on my own experience, you can separate your sample into two groups. One is for training and the other one is for testing. You can train your model, use the first part, and test the performance of your model using the remaining. And how does this study contribute to the literature? In the literature, early studies overlook this issue and report biased results. In most recent studies, two methods are applied to elevate the effect of misreporting. The first one is interval estimates, and the second one is instrument variables. For the first one, if you want to know the accurate effect of a program, you will have no idea from such studies. And for the second one, it's usually a big problem to get a good instrument. To our knowledge, this is the first paper to try to use machine learning method to solve this issue. The three purposes of this study is first one is use a classification algorithm to predict the true status of weak participation. The second one is compare the performance of different algorithms. The third one is identify the most powerful predictors. The five classification algorithms used in this study is 2 from linear models and 3 from nonlinear models. The first one is logistic regression, and the second one is support vector machines. And for the nonlinear part, naive Bayes and KNN and the decision tree are applied. For the predictor part, we use 3 kinds of variables. The first one is income eligibility. Based on the knowledge of the eligibility published by the federal government, people who has the household has the income lower than 185% of the federal poverty line are eligible to be in this program. And for this special program, only pregnant woman, infant, and children up to 5 can apply for this program. And the third category of variables we are using in this model is the consumption of weak eligible food. And for these variables, it's used to reduce the false negative rate. The data set used in this study is food apps. The full name is USDA's National Household Food Acquisition and Purchase Survey. It contains 4,826 representative US households. We select 793 honest households with weak information, and the sample year is 2012. The unique feature of this dataset is that it contains not only self-reported program participation status, but also administratively matched information on SNAP participation. We call the household honest only if the self-reported participant status is in line with the administrative matched information. Let's move on to the empirical results. These are the 5 confusion metrics of the 5 algorithms. We use 70% of our sample to do the training and use the 30% left to do the testing. And to make the result more clearly, we can see this table for the comparison. We can see that the logistic regression has the lowest misclassification rate, but as you can see here, it lost the ability to forecast the people actually in this program. What's more, as you can see here, actually it's a trade-off here, the false positive rate and the false negative rate. The naive-based model has the lowest false negative rate at the cost of the highest false positive rate. For the remaining 3 classification algorithms, KN model, decision tree, and the SVM model, they have similar result. They have around 15% total misclassification rate and around 3% false positive rate and around 90% false negative rate. This result is not perfect due to the limitation of the data. I will mention it in the next part, the caveats. The conclusion of this study is that misreporting in self-reported participation status of public program is very common, and the magnitude could be as high as 30 to 40%. And the classification algorithm can help in this circumstance. The out-of-sample misclassification rate of weak participation can be as low as 15% using our model and the predictors. The KN model, decision tree, and SVM model are the best choices. The 4 caveats is that we assume that the honest household report their true participant status of weak program, but it's just an assumption. But the good news is that in the next round of food app survey, this information may be included in the survey. And for this study, we use the national income standard to judge the income eligibility of all the sample households. And we know this standard is varies from state to state. If we have detailed household location information, we can improve this index. And similarly, for the pregnancy information, it's not included in this data set. We only use the woman who is at the age suitable for pregnant instead. And this is the space to improve in the future. And the last one is that detailed purchase information will help in identifying participants of weak program. I mean, we just use the food category in this study. If we have the UPC level purchase information, we will definitely improve the performance of our models. So the performance of our current models is not perfect, but we think this method is promising with the improvement of the data sets. That's it. Any questions? If there is no more questions, let's move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Yifang, for the presentation. I will share my screen now. Okay. You can see my screen, right? Okay, so the title of my presentation is Measuring Battery Diversity with High Frequency Mobile Phone Interviews in Ethiopia. It's a joint work with Ellen Makala and Tamara Magavok from UGA and Grinnell College, respectively. I am an Imana postdoctoral fellow, program administered by the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts. And I'm also a postdoctoral research fellow at UGA, the University of Georgia. So dietary diversity scores have been used in agriculture, health, and nutrition research in the past. And usually the data collection method relies on a recall method. That means households will be asked to report what they have consumed, for example, yesterday. That's like a 1-day recall period, but there is also sometimes 3 days recall period. And the most popular one is a 7 days recall period, but the recall periods of up to 15 days have been reported. When the recall period increases, there is a high cognitive burden on respondents in terms of remembering what type of food or food groups they consumed, and that results in recall error. For example, there is what we call telescoping, in which respondents include consumption episodes that occurred outside of the reference period into the reference period and report it as if it is consumed within this reference period. And of course, shorter recall periods decrease the cognitive burden, but they are not without problems, especially when you have cyclical food consumption within 1 week, like the case in the Ethiopian Orthodox religion followers who practice fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays. So there is a trade-off between this cognitive burden and recall period. What do we do in this research? So we conduct an experiment to develop and validate a survey method to resolve the trade-off between this cognitive burden and recall period. So we're trying to extend the reference period without increasing the cognitive burden associated with a longer recall period. The way we do that is we collect the data using phones by calling respondents twice a day and ask them what they have eaten between our calls. And we do that for 7 days. And randomly allocated households will receive similar questions, but in person within this 7 days. So by comparing these two methods, we will formally test whether the new method affects recall bias and within household measurement error. So our study population comes from Ethiopia, in the northern Ethiopia, and it includes women who are members of the village economic and social associations. And these are associations formed as part of graduation from poverty programs of CARE and World Vision Ethiopia. So we use their program enrollment records and we draw a random sample of 60 VESAs. And then we recruit 1 woman from each VESA member household to be our primary respondent. We then collected a baseline we conducted a baseline interview, collecting some basic information. And then after the baseline data collection, households report their dietary diversity either through phone or in person. So we randomly assign each household to one of the 2 survey methods, either through phone or in person. So we collect through phone, we collect food intake twice a day for 7 days, and each call referencing a clearly bounded period. And on the in-person, we ask a 24-hour women's dietary diversity measure to construct women's dietary diversity score. And we also ask a 7-day household dietary diversity measure to construct household dietary diversity score. And the in-person day when exactly the interview happens is randomly assigned within the week. So our main specification is this model, where Y is either WDDS or HDDS, that's the Women Dietary Diversity Score or the Household Dietary Diversity Score. T is treatment, whether the survey was conducted using the high frequency phone data collection or the in-person, and X represents a vector of covariance. So going to the results, here you can see these are coefficient plots I am presenting three coefficient plots, one from for the HDDS and two for the WDDS. You can see that the coefficient for HDDS is negative and significant, showing that the dietary diversity that comes from high frequency mobile phone is significantly lower than the one that comes from in-person. And when you come to the WDDS, the dietary diversity score that comes from high frequency mobile phones is positive and significantly higher than the one that comes from the in-person. So why? The question is, why do women report lower 7-day household dietary diversity with the Thorne method? We think it's likely due to telescoping. That is, when asked about 7 days all at once, respondents are including additional items that might have been consumed outside of the 7-day period. And why do women report then higher 24-hour dietary diversity with the Thorne method, like we saw here in our previous slide? That might be because they occasionally forget to report items over the 24-hour recall, but they will be able to remember them when we are asking them over the phone in a shorter and bounded recall period. So what is the implication? The implication is, so in this study, we see that recall bias or recall error could work in different directions depending on the recall period. So we see that respondents report higher food items when the recall period is larger, and they underreport the type of food groups or items they consumed when the recall period is shorter. So this is a very important addition to our knowledge on how recall bias or error affects food consumption measurement. And the high frequency measure corrects these biases and provides a better dietary diversity measure. So thank you very much. Your questions and comments are most welcomed. So if you have any questions, so I see some questions here on the chat. Okay, it's not a question. So if you have questions, if not, then we can proceed to the next presentation.
Hello, this is Eugene Kunda. Are you hearing me fine?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you. This presentation is about corn futures deliveries. It was part of a master's thesis by Victor Fernandez. I served as an advisor along with Michelle Robe. Michelle is also the Clearing Corp professor of derivatives at the University of Illinois. I work with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and therefore any remarks I make and views I state in this presentation are mine alone and do not make any inferences for either the agency or the United States. Futures markets are essential for both price discovery and risk management in the agricultural area and many commodities and financial areas as well. And one of the important factors to assure their efficiency is the meeting of futures prices with cash prices through convergence at the delivery period. In an efficiently working market, there should be rare occurrences of deliveries. So Victor's analysis explored the reasons why deliveries are being made, when they're being made, and what are the consequences of those deliveries. Other studies had also looked at these areas of convergence and embedded options in futures markets. And so what we're doing is narrowing it into particularly what incentives are sellers of futures markets facing in deciding whether to make delivery or not. Also, the consequences then of those deliveries will be the third area that we look at. First, it's important to recognize that in futures markets, you are not actually delivering the physical commodity, you're delivering a financial instrument. In the case of corn, it's a shipping certificate. Once you receive that certificate through the delivery process, you have these three options of either holding on to that certificate and pay the storage to do so, sell it to another party, or sell the futures and redeliver the certificate. So essentially, there are three markets in the futures cash certificate process. In the futures market, you buy or sell, go long or short. You decide whether to make or take the deliveries. Once that is accomplished, you receive the certificate. And then with the certificate, those three choices again. Finally, if you were to decide to cancel it for loadout, then it becomes an obligation of the issuer to provide that physical commodity. The process itself is a 3-day process, starting at the first delivery day, the first business day of the futures month, and then it goes through these 3 days in a cycle through the last trading day. The deliveries are made at shipping stations along the Illinois River, as indicated by the dots up in the upper left-hand slide picture here. And each circle representing a firm that is regular for delivery on the Chicago Board of Trade for corn. And in this case happens to be soybeans as well. Since all of these locations are on the same common waterway, it uniquely represents then an opportunity to essentially focus the price using a reference to the freight rates to New Orleans in Louisiana, which would be at the end of the mouth of the Mississippi River. So that each of these locations have a barge benchmark representing how far they are from Louisiana, and that's shown in the column in the middle here. And then each rate itself is a single rate, a percentage of that benchmark that can be applied at any location. It gives you the freight cost. The two types of transactions we're going to look at here are the cost insurance and freight, which is the price from storage to destination, versus a free on board, which is the price at the origination. So CIF, price at destination, FOB, price at origin. In the delivery process, the short initiates the delivery, since they have to have a certificate in order to start the process. They have the decision of whether they're going to use the grain that they have, whether to sell it in the cash market or to sell it in the futures market. And they make that decision based on the delivery value equivalent, the DVE. The DVE accounts then for all of the costs and making the cash price of the grain at New Orleans on a CIF basis equal to the cash price at the delivery location up on the Illinois River on a FOB basis. So the premiums represent quality of the grains that's being delivered, the location it's being delivered at, as well as the cost. So those first top and bottom lines are pretty much fixed. Storage rate is variable by the number of days it takes to load out, typically about 3. But the main variable here is the barge freight rate. So the hypotheses were tested. One that the difference between the NOLA basis and the delivery value equivalent, the null hypothesis would be that they would have no impact. So we would reject that hypothesis. And the second one is on the timing, when the deliveries are made. When the market is in carry or contango, that those deliveries would be made early. And when the market is in inverse or backwardation, those deliveries are made later. And then finally, what is the effect on those spreads after a delivery has been made? So the results, delivery value equivalent versus the basis, shown here, that the futures in a sense then are represented as being above cash. So these are the occurrences of deliveries being made. And indeed, when when the delivery value equivalent is greater than the basis or the SIF basis at New Orleans, deliveries are made. The second hypothesis on when those are occurring, we're looking at the sample broken out into when there was an inverse versus when we were in carry. You can see that primarily the markets are in carry. It's primarily when the deliveries are being made. When it's in an inverse, you can see that the deliveries are not at the beginning of the month, but more at the end of the delivery periods. Lastly, what does this mean for the futures market after the deliveries are being made? The hypothesis was that a delivery would weaken that spread as the deliveries are being placed into participants that would redeliver, or that it would strengthen the spreads if the delivery was being made into participants taking the delivery that would cancel it for loadout. Currently, that hypothesis had no significance. Further work on it will be to include then the control for who takes the delivery. So my final remarks, first of all, that the delivery value equivalent establishes the matrix, the measure to determine why, for an economic reason, a delivery would be made. The carry in the futures market or the futures market spreads determine when those deliveries are being made. When there's a carry, it's early. When there's an inversion, those deliveries are later. And finally, we're continuing for future work, we'll be adding conditionalities on who takes those deliveries and whether that affects the spread. And I'm open for any questions. Okay, well, very good. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this with you. And it's been very interesting. And I think we're ready for our last presentation then.
Hi, can you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I think I'm the last presenter. Hello, everyone. My name is Quan Zhong. The paper I will present here is price pass-through. Oh, shoot. Is price pass-through and capacity impacts in the U.S. beef industry. As you can see, the U.S. beef industry is composed of several segments listed here. This paper will focus on this circle part. The cow-calf part produce baby calves, and these calves would be transferred to backgroundings when they are weaned. Then the backgroundings will graze these calves till they get big enough to send to feedlots as feeder cattle. And feedlots will feed these feeder cattle to produce fat cattle that are ready to be slaughtered. I know it's hard. Well, in these procedures, price is a key bridge to link the segments and transfer information downstream or upstream. Specifically, we will study how the change in fat cattle price or corn price pass through upstream to feeder cattle price. Well, firstly, following Zhao's paper, we propose a hypothesis price pass-through rates by using the Ricardian run theory. RT argues that the holders of the scarce resource can extract any surplus. In the short run, feeder cattle are in fixed supply and are the scarce resource in the beef industry. So when the price of fat cattle increase or the price of corn decrease, the sellers of feeder cattle could get the extra surplus by increasing the price of feeder cattle. However, previous literature ignored the reaction of feedlot managers. But in this study, we allow feedlot manager to react to the market information like price change, COVID pandemic, etc. But how? The feedlot owners can change their capacity utilization rate. Under this circumstance, think that if the profit for feedlots is too low, such that feedlots would shut down, or the capacity utilization rate is already too high to take more cattle, then feeder cattle would no longer be the scarce resource. So we would expect a different price pass-through rate. So generally, we have two research questions. First, does RRT hold in the US beef industry? And second, how does the capacity utilization rate of feedlots impact the price pass-through rate? We have 3 data sources, and we construct a weekly data set. Data set includes price, capacity, and some other information from 1995 to 2022. And we finally find that the 95 capacity utilization rate has best model fit. Well, I will not waste our time to show the detailed coefficients here. We can see the key findings in these tables. The first table presents the price pass-through from fed cattle to feeder cattle. And the second table shows it from corn to feeder cattle. So you can see in the second column, we gave the RRT hypothesis price pass-through. This 1.62 means that if the price of fed cattle goes up by 1 unit, RRT expects the feeder cattle price goes up by 1.62 units. And in the third column, we show the regression pass-through. And you can see that the regression pass-through is highly dependent on the capacity utilization rate. When capacity utilization rate is over 95%, there is significant difference between two pass-through rates. But when it's higher than 95%, there won't be significant difference. Well, similar results are observed from the corn price pass-through. So the general conclusion is that when capacity utilization rate is lower than 95%, we observe more than 100% pass-through rate in fed cattle on corn price to feeder cattle price. But when it's higher than 95%, we observe 100% pass-through. Well, the next question is why it happens. For now, a potential solution we are considering is that the market and the feedlot managers may overreact to the price change when capacity is lower than 95%. But when the capacity is higher, the market and managers became more reasonable and rational, so they can choose the RT price pass-through. Well, that's all. Thanks for listening. This is still a working paper. If you want to get the newly version, welcome to email me. Any questions? Well,
thank you everyone.
Thank you guys.